Hello and welcome to Archives and Records Simplified. So a quick word about these videos. These videos are aimed at people looking for basic knowledge about archives and records, and this could honestly apply to anyone. You may be a student that's looking to undertake the Archivist and Records Management course. You may be a librarian that's been asked to work with some archives. You might be a digitisation manager who wants to know more about the collections and the material they're digitising, or you may just have a general interest in archives and records. This is a topic which I think will intersect with many industries, and the idea of these videos is to be as open and as usable for as many people as possible. The vast majority of videos in this channel will be less than 15 minutes, but some of them will get more complex in certain parts. Sources and further reading will always be posted at the end of the video. And also, I would just like to add, if you have any questions, feel free to put it in the comments below, or if you have any requests, if there's any topics you would like me to make another short video about, please also feel more than free to mention them. I'd be delighted to learn. A quick word about me. I'm an archivist based in London. You can look at my LinkedIn profile here. And lastly, I apologise for my thick accent. I realise if you're not Scottish, you might be struggling a little bit to understand me. Therefore, there'll be a full transcript posted in the description at the end of each video. Okay, I hope you enjoyed the channel and you find this of use. Also, if you find these videos useful, I would be really grateful if you could like and subscribe and possibly hit the bell button as well. Thanks. Okay, so this video will go over some key terms and words, and it's important to note that this will almost certainly not be exhaustive, but it will highlight some terms that I think are quite common. Okay, so some general terms. Archive. So archive has a couple of definitions in this context. On the one hand, it can often mean a record which is being preserved, i.e. like an item within a collection, and it can also mean a place where archives are kept, such as an archive repository. Record is a document or even just a thing. Sometimes a record can be more broad than a paper-based material that captures information about an event or occurrence. I did a separate video on what records and archives are, if this is of more interest. Appraisal. In this context, appraisal means deciding which records or documents have long-term or archival value. Authenticity. In an archival context, this means something is genuine and not counterfeit. Accession. This is a term that's often used to describe the process of acquiring new materials, as in you accession them into your record system or archive. Content management system is an application used to manage content and information. An example for an archivist might be something like an Archivists Toolkit. Metadata literally means information about information. For example, the date stamp in this video and the title are both examples of metadata. Ephemera. In an archival sense, this word is often used to describe materials which are difficult to classify or describe. Okay, a few terms more specific towards records management. So EDRMS stands for Electronic Document Records Management System. This is again a type of content management system. Office 365 Document Record Management Solution is an example of one, and what this does is it helps you manage information. Vital records are essential records a business cannot survive without. This may be like bank statements or certain passwords. Current records are records that are needed in the day-to-day running of an organisation, but note that some current records might be vital but are not used day-to-day. Inactive records are records which are no longer used on a regular basis. Eventually, these should either be disposed or archived, and to be honest, the vast majority will probably be disposed. Records capture is the process of capturing records, which I would also say means not only capturing the content, but the context and the structure, which likely means recording metadata and having an idea of the context in which the record was created. Retention schedule controls the periods and time a set of records will be used and retained. It can also include other information. Transitory records are records that have short-term use. This could be a copy of a report which will later be updated. Business continuity relates to disaster planning. In this context, it may mean thinking about what records you would need in a crisis, such as a disaster management strategy, to ensure that your business or operation can continue as well as possible. It may also be worth thinking about which records are essential to ensure business continuity, such as certain passwords, for example. Cataloging. Okay, so a series is a grouping of subseries, files, or items. Essentially, it's a broader category that includes contained information. It's often the first level below collection level or funds level, but not always as some archivists use the term. Subfunds and as part of the catalogue. A file is a smaller and more discrete unit of description in an archival collection. It can mean a physical folder or even an item in some cases, but can also refer to a box. Essentially, it will often follow a subseries or a series description. Funds is the term used for the material created or collected exclusively by a certain entity. It could be better defined as a group of materials that all originate from the same creator. Funds may often be used as an all-encompassing term for the entirety of a collection, but that's controversial and some people would challenge that to an extent. Provenance. This relates to the origin of materials and where they come from. As a general rule, you don't want to mix materials that come from different sources. Original order often refers to the original order of the collection. Ideally, you want to retain an archival collection as much in the order as which you found it. You don't want to rearrange it too much. Essentially, you might therefore try to describe it as it is as well as possible, but with messier collections, this is a lot more difficult. Circa, okay, so this is a good one. This is a term often used to estimate an approximate date. You may say the dinosaurs went extinct circa 65 million years ago. Okay, so some legal definitions. GDPR stands for General Data Protection Regulation and is a regulation in EU law and data protection and privacy in the European Union and the European Economic Area. It has strong regulations on how an information manager should handle the personal information of a data subject. And in this context, a data subject is the person whom the personal information relates to. Personal data is any information that relates to an identifiable living person. Freedom of information, and as another piece of legislation, essentially, freedom of information ensures the public can access public information, but there are exemptions to this. Copyright is a type of intellectual property that gives someone permission to use and copy a work. Copyright restrictions, for example, may prevent you from selling an artist's drawing without their permission. Intellectual property is a type of property that includes the creations of a person's intellect. This may be an artistic or musical work, for example. A patent could be an example of intellectual property. A sensitivity review is the term an archivist or records manager may use to describe the process of checking a collection for any materials that may include sensitive personal information or materials that should be closed. And lastly, to restrict or close often means not allowing access to a set of archives or records. This is normally temporary and the date depends on the materials in question and likely the expected lifespan of the person whom they relate to. Okay, and some digital terms. Born digital often relates to an item which was digitally born as opposed to an item which may have been digitized. Digitization is the process of making a digital copy of an item, such as scanning a form or a document. Technology watch relates to keeping an eye on developing technologies and trends. Renderability relates to being able to access a digital object and its significant properties. For example, if you can access a file on your computer, you may say you can render it. If it's corrupted, you may say it cannot be rendered. Significant properties are the characteristics of a digital object that you want to reproduce. Sometimes you may migrate a set of materials, and in the process some information is lost, and ideally you don't want to lose any significant properties. Migration in this context is the term used for migrating information from one format to another. For example, you may migrate information from an outdated spreadsheet software onto a Microsoft Excel sheet. So effectively, it's almost a form of digital preservation, or at least a digital preservation strategy. Emulation is where you recreate the environment needed to access a certain format or digital item. So this is an alternative to migration. An example of this is often used with video games, and essentially what you do is you use a computer system to emulate the conditions needed to access the item in its original format, rather than changing the format so you can access it in current technologies, essentially. Bits are the most basic unit of information in computing and digital technologies. 8 bits make a byte, and you should be familiar with the term bytes if you look at file sizes. Okay, so I think that's everything. At the very end, I've left some references to further reading with further glossaries. As I say, there's a lot more terms I could go into, but these were essentially just shows 8 terms per category, and I hope you find it useful. Thanks. And if you find these videos useful, I would be very grateful if you could like and subscribe, and possibly hit the bell button as well. I'm hoping to do a lot more of these videos in the coming months and year, and liking, subscribing and hitting the bell button will make it more likely that you'll see updates in your feed.